We're back for your ears only. I'm Melissa Exelberth.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. This represents the department's latest action to protect voting rights, but it will not be the last. That was Attorney General Eric Holder as the Justice Department announced it would join a civil suit to block a new Texas redistricting plan as discriminatory. Also last week, a new Pew poll found that only a third of Black Americans and less than half of whites think the country has made a lot of racial progress since the March on Washington 50 years ago. Now this.
A judge sentenced Private First Class Bradley Manning to 35 years in prison during a sentencing hearing today at Fort Meade, Maryland. He also received a reduction in rank, dishonorable discharge, and forfeiture of all pay and allowances.
The court is troubled that the government's revelations regarding NSA's acquisition of internet transactions mark the third instance in less than 3 years in which the government has disclosed a substantial misrepresentation regarding the scope of a major collection program.
Pentagon TV last week reported the 35-year prison sentence handed Private Bradley Manning for giving a record trove of classified military and diplomatic documents to WikiLeaks, in part as a warning to other would-be whistleblowers on the presumption such punishment can prevent similar breaches. The case took on an even more contentious twist when Manning revealed he wanted the Army to provide hormone treatment and surgery so he could become a woman named Chelsea. The Pentagon said no such medical treatment was available and left questions about prison facilities for Manning as a female.
Also last week, leaks by former NSA contract worker Edward Snowden led to confirmation that America's secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court had found repeated improper intrusions on privacy by the National Security Agency, including the collection of tens of thousands of purely domestic emails for which the NSA had to pay millions of dollars in compensation to Internet providers, the New York Times reported. To consider these and other aspects of American surveillance and security, for your ears only, we continue our conversation with Lawrence Korb, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, Senior Advisor to the Center for Defense Information, Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. Thanks for staying with us.
Nice to be with you.
What impact do you think the Manning conviction and sentence will have on others who see government impropriety in official documents to which they have access, and on the reporters who count on their leaks to bring improprieties to light?
Well, I think it will have a chilling effect because people who see some wrongdoing in the government and try and go through the appropriate channels to reveal it and then nothing happens, I think are going to be much less willing to do it. In fact, this administration has, prosecuted more people under this than all of their predecessors combined, the so-called 1917 Espionage Act. So I think it will have a chilling impact, and it will make it more difficult for us really to debate the issues that we should.
We should also ask about the possibility of a death sentence for self-radicalized Army psychiatrist Nadal Malik Hasan, convicted of killing 13 and wounding more than 30 at Fort Hood, Texas. A powerful warning to terrorists, or is it precisely the martyrdom they seek?
No, I think in terms of, giving him life without parole would be much better because he wants to be executed and then he becomes a martyr for the cause. If people back in 1993, the people who blew up the World Trade Center, the first time, they didn't get the death sentence either. And I think that that's important because you don't want to enhance the narrative of these jihadist groups.
What about the argument in Snowden's case that except for mainly technical glitches and contacts with foreigners under suspicion, no Americans' communication content has actually been heard or read, despite requests for it, we read, by some other government agencies?
Well, no, I think, Snowden has performed a very valuable service. I can't see anything that he's released, whereas, Manning was like 700,000 documents. I think if he had been a little bit more selective, there would be even more sympathy, for him. I mean, Snowden has provoked a debate that we should have had, and, as a result of Snowden, we're finding out more and more that, NSA went beyond, the boundaries and what they were even telling Congress.
Because of the Snowden leaks, as you say, we've learned that the FISA court judges are almost all Republican appointees chosen by the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. But last week, Roberts named a Democratic appointee, Jose Cabranes of the U.S. Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Actually, I knew him in college, to a panel that hears those rare appeals of FISA court rulings. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. I mean, most people did not realize, A, who appointed the people in the FISA court, and B, that Roberts basically was appointing, people from one end of the political spectrum, which then it's understandable that you've had, thousands of FISA requests and only one or two have ever been turned down.
And see that there was even an appeals process with no attorneys on the other side to argue.
But that's right. I mean, and Judge Reggie Walton, who was one of the people Roberts appointed, even he said, this is not the way to do it because you just get the government side. And as we found out, this week, the government's not telling you the whole truth when they ask for these things.
What about proposals to have the Chief Justice share his power of appointment to the basic FISA court?
Well, I think that would be good any way in which we can get a balance. I mean, because one of the things we see is the power of the courts, and you want to make sure that all points of view are representative, not just, people with a particular point of view. I mean, Roberts picks these people. There's no confirmation process or anything. We don't know where they're coming from on these issues.
We hear the NSA may get itself out of the metadata storage game by arranging for the telephone and internet companies to keep the records, which they could then access for intelligence purposes. Do you think that's a step away from the big government control, or is it a ruse?
No, I think it's a step away, but I do think that before they get them from these companies, that's when you got to get the FISA courts involved.
How important overall is the NSA communications surveillance? If it could not connect the calls and internet activities of the Boston Marathon bombers, for instance, as they became more radicalized, even after an initial warning by Russian intelligence?
Well, the interesting thing there, the FBI had the warning, and they did tap some of the phone calls of the Tsarnaev, the older Tsarnaev brother, but they didn't find anything, at all when they did. So it really wasn't a question of us not knowing, because the way it works, if NSA finds out something with domestic communications, they turn that over to the FBI, and they did, tap his phone calls.
What sort of limits do you see Congress imposing on NSA surveillance, especially as threats to privacy under President Obama have become an attractive issue to some conservatives who had no problem with the program under President Bush after 9/11?
Well, I do think that, this will, have a healthy debate, and I do think we're going to put a lot of restrictions on, the metadata, for example, that they can compile and the reasons that they do it. Plus, I think you're going to have, somebody representing the other side, if you will, when they go before the FISA court. And I think it's rather ironic that President Obama, who campaigned against this type of thing, has allowed it to go on and really didn't do anything about it until Snowden released the stuff.
Thank you. Lawrence Korb is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, senior advisor to the Center for Defense Information, and Assistant Secretary of Defense for President Reagan.
Quote from the news, "I hope grown-ups get in a room and behave like grown-ups, not simply actors on a political stage." That was Wisconsin's GOP Congressman Reed Ribble on the growing threat that conservatives may shut down the government in efforts to kill Obamacare and other administration-supported spending. The president, meanwhile, proposed restructuring federal loans for higher education, and Catholic clergy from major dioceses planned sermons next month to support immigration reform, some to include a path to citizenship.
And here's another quote. "You have a very Rube Goldberg system. We've just put patches on it without attacking the basic problem." That was Gene Noser of the Abel Noser Brokerage on a computer problem that halted NASDAQ trading for 3 hours and rippled throughout digital Wall Street.
Next, sexual harassment in San Diego, the military, and beyond, for your ears only.